We had pundits and commentators and hosts, including on our favorite network and on radio, telling us about a wave. But you don't have a wave until you have a wave. That's my attitude. I mean, I was part of 2010 in the Tea Party. I was part of the Reagan Revolution. So we didn't see the massive wave coming in the Reagan Revolution until it came. We didn't see the massive wave in the Tea Party until it came.
This is where freedom rings.
If you believe in America, if you believe in the Constitution empowers us. It's a new day. America's back. America's back, and America's going to get strong again. We're going to defend America, and we're going to defend our interests.
Liberty's voice, Levin TV.
Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Levin TV. This will be my first show, and these will be my first comments since the election on Tuesday. Before I want to get into my comments, I want to play something for you that I said last week. One of the things that was problematic to me was all these pundits and commentators, including on our side, who kept talking about a red wave, a red tsunami, and Armageddon for the Democrats. And I don't understand that kind of talk from hosts and commentators and pundits. Maybe they based it on the polls or whatever, but nobody had final results yet. Keep that stuff for after the fact, not before the fact. How else are you going to generate the kind of votes you need and the kind of motivation and inspiration you need for people to vote when you're telling them it's already won, it's in the can? Now, those of you listening to me on radio, you know, I've been saying this for months. Those of you who watch me on Fox, you know, I've been saying this for a long time. And of course, those of you who have us here at Levin TV know the same thing. But last week, I made it as crystal clear as I humanly possibly could. Go. Now, you're hearing a lot on Fox and elsewhere, people come on and predict how many seats we're going to win in the Senate, how many seats we're going to win in the House. Do you find this helpful? I don't know why people need to predict these things. You want to predict these things, write them down and wait till after the election. Now, why do I say that? We need people to vote. We need people to have a sense of urgency. We need people to do more than they normally do on Election Day and before Election Day to get their family members, friends, colleagues, neighbors to vote, to go through their email lists, to go through their phone lists, maybe text people, to contact people you might not normally contact, but who you know might need help to vote and will vote the right way. We can't rely on the Republican National Committee. We can't rely on precinct workers. You're the precinct worker. I have nothing against precinct workers. In fact, they're very important. But we have to take matters into our own hands. We did it in 2010 with the Tea Party movement. It was done last year with the parental movement in the schools and so forth. This is how the base needs to act. And even beyond the base, independents and Democrats who love this country, who can see that it's heading south, the borders are wide open, we're gutting the police force, we're gutting our military with social engineering. Everywhere you look, we're gutting women's sports. The radical left ideologues through this administration have control of the instrumentalities of government. You look at the House and the Senate, their agenda is to fundamentally alter the way we govern ourselves by eliminating the filibuster rules so they can ram through whatever they want, and it'll be almost irreversible, even with just 50 senators, if they can get away with it. And in the House, of course, all they want to do is investigate Donald Trump and try and give a black eye to the Republican Party. It's going to be up to you. I have a headline here from today's Washington Examiner. Democrats lead in early and mail-in voting as more than 22 million ballots already cast. A historic record in early voting, and the Democrats are leading in early voting, 45% to 33.3%. Now, you might say, as the pollsters say, and I don't really normally care what the pollsters say, well, that's typical. Well, if it's typical, we're not going to crush them. And so whether I'm the lone voice on this, and others will join me who have radio or TV shows, it is crucially important that we stop predicting and stop talking about red waves and red tsunamis. Pray to God it happens. If it happens, we celebrate. We are thrilled. But it has to happen to happen. In other words, we have to vote. We have to organize. We have to do our thing. You know, I see things a little differently. I'm an activist. I've always been an activist. Since I was 13, I would work the polls, not so much for the Republican Party, for the conservative candidates. And that's how I got my toe in the water when it came to politics. When I was in law school, I ran for the local school board. I was 19. I had started the Committee for Tax Limitation because the Democrats had massively increased property taxes. And I was involved in the Republican primary decisions. And then finally, the head of the Republican Party came to me and asked me if we could help the Republican Party. I said, as long as we can push the right agenda. And as 19 years old, I was politicking in areas that were considered solidly Republican. And these were mostly Gentile areas. It was hilarious. German areas and Italian areas. They couldn't wait for Levin to show up. And then in the Jewish areas, more Democrat areas, they couldn't wait for Levin to get out. But we overwhelmed them. And so this is the way you do it. It's door by door. It's canvassing. It's calling. And if 100,000 of us do that, then I say we will crush them. Because 100,000 times 20, that's a big number. And even more. So Democrats lead in early and mail-in voting. Now keep a few things in mind. The Democrat candidates in these marginal districts or who won in Republican districts are posing as moderates. Every single Democrat voted for the last massive bill that has caused incredible inflation. Every one of them. Every single Democrat voted for 87,000 new IRS agents who are going to be auditing you. Well, Mark, I don't pay income taxes. Well, they'll audit that too. Why don't you? I'm telling you, they're going to be knocking on your door. They're going to be sending you these scary letters. That's how it works. 87,000, they need something to do because they already have 90,000. $80 billion towards that. That's what they spent. That's what they got through at the very end because they want these police state powers to control. More information coming out how the White House and the Democrats worked with the oligarchs in Silicon Valley to silence you on social media. We can't have that kind of tyrannical mentality. And yet that's what they did. As you know, and I don't even need to tell you, the border is wide open. But most of us have not been to the border, or most of you have not been to the border. Do you know what's going on that border? It is criminal mayhem. I mean, attractive young ladies are being raped and molested and sold into sexual slavery. The drug cartels are running the border. You can go miles and miles on that border. You won't find any border patrol because what the Biden administration has done is they've taken the border patrol off the front line. They're doing administrative work. And you have to hope that there's enough state police and so forth in Texas and Arizona to be manning the border. You can't have a country survive like this. No other country does this. So these are diabolical, intentional acts by the Democrat Party and their president. And so the only way you can push back is now. We are very fortunate. We have an election in a week to try and set things straight. That doesn't mean everything's going to be fixed, whether we have one house or two. The president has enormous executive powers, obviously, and he can veto whatever he wants. But we got to make the case. We've got to begin the process. We've got to start fighting inch by inch by inch for our liberty back, for our country back. And so to watch people just talk about what they predict will happen, I don't even ask guests, what do you think's going to happen? Why does it matter? They're not Nostradamus. They can look at the polls. They're not 100% sure. I can tell you what will happen in this sense. We vote en masse, we win en masse. We don't vote enough, they win en masse. That's not a good thing. In fact, it's a disastrous thing. I'm not Nostradamus. I said it right there. I'm not prescient, but this is basic stuff. Now let me do an analysis as of how I digest this right now, because it's fairly complicated. We have people on TV, including our favorite cable channel, who are telling you they know exactly what took place. Too many extreme mega candidates that were backed by Donald Trump. You're hearing that from the Bush wing of the Republican Party or the anti-Trump wing of the Republican Party. It's conceivable, but these are citizen candidates, many of them, who won their primaries fair and square, who were predicted to win in close races by the pollsters. But there are also non-MAGA supported candidates who lost. Look at O'Day in Colorado. That was a McConnell Rove candidate, and you had McConnell Rove candidates throughout the country who lost, and non-MAGA candidates who won. For instance, the governor's race in Wisconsin was so tight. Michaels wasn't MAGA. You can look at Alaska. The fact is, Shabaka won. She's MAGA, and McConnell spent $9 million trying to destroy her because he wants his lady friend, politically, of course, Lisa Murkowski, to win that seat. She might, because they set up a corrupt election system there to specifically help her. So we'll see how that turns out. It's convoluted. And we can go all around the country. So this wasn't a MAGA loss. It wasn't a McConnell loss. It was what it was. So that narrative doesn't really work. The choice of candidates. Have you seen these Democrat candidates? They're nuts. They're insane. Warnock is a Marxist. Others, radical left, they have voted for open borders. They have voted for destroying our energy industry, driving up the cost of fuel and so forth. These aren't moderates, and yet some of them won. And they're horrible candidates. Well, it must be Kevin McCarthy's fault. Some way it might be. Well, it must be that the Democrat message of democracy is dying won. I doubt it. How about that Democrat message on abortion? That's sort of underlaid everything, but we pretended it didn't. Really? Ron DeSantis had the biggest and most spectacular election victory in the election, and he's pro-life, strongly so. They raised the abortion issue with him. It didn't touch him. Kemp in Georgia, pro-life, strong pro-life bill there. Didn't hurt him. Abbott in Texas, strongly pro-life there. Didn't hurt him. So that scenario doesn't work either, as far as I'm concerned. Now, looking at the House right now, it's very disappointing, right? You were told that we were going to win anywhere from 15 to 40 election seats, 45 seats, that this was going to be historic. We heard people with a lot of experience who've served in office, who've been involved in waves, experts and so forth, tell you this over and over and over again. You had hosts who had little experience telling you about a wave, a tsunami, Armageddon, and on and on and on. You had pollsters telling you that every close race was going to cut for the Republicans, right? And then, of course, you had the talk about the House and how that was going to be a blowout. And why wouldn't you think that, given all the issues on the table? I had people coming up to me today going, Mark, what happened? First, yesterday it was, Mark, what's going to happen? And then it's, Mark, what happened? Every person who's come up to me in the months leading up to this election, or any caller I've had on radio, I've said, I don't know what's going to happen. Fight like you're behind and fight like hell. That's how I work. It's not about being a Svengali of some kind or a prognosticator of some kind and patting myself on the back. We have enough of those on radio and TV and in the public square. I try to think these things through. Now, the fact of the matter is I was disappointed, very disappointed. And about 20 minutes before this program, you know, my noodle keeps going, I was thinking about this. We lost an important seat in Pennsylvania. It's an embarrassment to the nation. Something's not right when a guy like Fetterman can beat a guy like Dr. Oz in a state that's not a radical left-wing state. It's a true purple, sometimes more reddish state. I know, I'm from Pennsylvania. Philadelphia is a disaster. It's hardcore left. It's incredibly corrupt politically and in so many other ways. It's the tail that wags the dog, and yet still Republicans have won. Oz lost. What happened there? What happened there is it was still a close race, but you can't have a debate near the end of October when you have 50 days of early voting. Insanity of that. And so the Democrats played it. The only way they would have a debate with Oz is if there was one debate, 1 hour, a handful of questions, very late in the election process, right? About 10 days before the election. So you had well over 1 million people had already voted. I think that affected the outcome of the election, as well as a gubernatorial candidate on the Republican side, who I never cared for, Mastriani, was a disaster. So Oz had really his back against the wall, but no excuses. That's the way it was. In Nevada, they're not calling it right now, but to me, right or wrong, it looks like Adam Laxalt's going to win. And he'd be a great senator. His grandfather was a great senator. That means he would actually be taking out an incumbent Democrat. It would be the only incumbent Democrat running in the Senate to lose. In fact, it would be the only incumbent running in the Senate to lose. So that would put the Republicans at 50 seats, the Democrats at 49, and Georgia, should there be a runoff, which I think there will be, deciding if it's a tied Senate with Kamala again, breaking the tie vote, so the Republicans having a 51-49 majority. Now, that's not what we hoped for, right? You heard all the pollsters. You heard all the predictions. Predictions from whom? People don't know squat. You didn't hear them from me. Now, the predictions. Here was the problem from the get-go. In 2022, this election cycle, there were 34 Senate seats up. 14 were Democrat, 20 were Republican. Now, what does that mean? That means the Republicans had to defend 20 seats. It's a huge number. And the Democrats only had to defend 14. The Republicans lost 1 of the 20 seats. The Democrats lost 1 of the Democrat seats out of the 14. So putting aside all the propaganda from the Republicans and the Democrats and the media and the pollsters, given the nature of the economy, I feel we should have done better. But we could have done a hell of a lot worse just looking at the math. Just looking at the math. The problem in 2024 is going to be for the Democrats. It's worse than a flip. There will be 23 Democrat seats up and 10 Republican seats out of 33. So the Republicans are going to have to defend only 10 seats where they can concentrate their resources. And the Democrats are going to have to defend 23 seats. So what are they going to do in 2024? See, they really needed to pick seats up this time around in order to protect them from 2024. I hope this is making sense. But they didn't pick up anything. I'm not a Pollyanna. I'm just laying it out. Now, on the House side, it's harder to make that case. On the House side, we had Republican leadership, pollsters. Again, we had pundits and commentators and hosts, including on our favorite network and on radio, telling us about a wave. But you don't have a wave until you have a wave. That's my attitude. I mean, I was part of 2010 in the Tea Party. I was part of the Reagan Revolution. So we didn't see the massive wave coming in the Reagan Revolution until it came. We didn't see the massive wave in the Tea Party until it came. And so some people were trying to see a wave before a wave, which is exactly why I played that clip for you where I said, forget about it. We have to act to make a wave. And so when you look at the House, I started to look at a number of these races that were close that we lost. And here's what I found. There were about 20 races held by Democrats, including in blue states, including in purple states. 20 that were lost by less than 5%. Some were lost by a couple thousand votes. 20 held by Democrat incumbents. We had a lot of citizen candidates running, first-time candidates running. We had a lot of candidates running with diverse backgrounds. That's a good thing. Black, brown, yellow, red, white. Again, citizen candidates brought new people into the process. But nevertheless, we didn't have this massive red wave in the House. And you hear a lot of explanations for this. Well, we had a partial wave in the cycle before. Or you can hear the left and the media, by the way, which is celebrating, so excited on MSLSD and the Constipated News Channel, so excited at Mediaite, Media Matters, so excited in the Democrat world of nuts and fruits. Anyway, what does that mean when we effectively tied in the Senate despite them having so many more seats to defend. And we came close. You know what they say about coming close? Doesn't mean a damn thing, but in some ways it does. We came close in toppling up to 20 Democrat incumbents. Very close. In states like Nevada, Virginia, even more in New York, all over the country, actually. So what does that mean? Well, there is no definitive answer, but let me lay a few options out for you on the table. You look at Florida. Florida was a tsunami. Florida was Armageddon for the Democrats. Florida was, by every definition, an absolute slaughter by the Republicans of the Democrats. A slaughter. You have a Republican governor who won by about 40,000 votes 4 years ago, who won by nearly 20% this time around. And an incumbent Republican senator who also did extremely well, rode that wave somewhat, won by like 15 or 16%, over a Democrat who was seriously considered as a running mate to Joe Biden, Val Demings. No pushover. It was a slaughter. The legislature in Florida now is supermajority Republican in the Senate and in the Assembly, just like California, but on the Republican side. All done in a 4-year cycle. They picked up 4 Republican seats in the state of Florida. 4. 4. A slaughter, including defeating 1 Democrat incumbent. DeSantis won about 60% of the Hispanic vote in Florida. And by the way, the Hispanic vote for Republicans was higher than typical all across the country. That's worth a footnote or more. But in Florida, DeSantis won Miami-Dade County, hardcore Democrat county, heavy immigration. He won the county. He won Palm Beach County, which is filled with a bunch of liberals and leftists. My skin color, white mostly, although I'm an olive skin American, but you get the point. So he wins Miami-Dade County. He wins Palm Beach County. There's very little blue left in Florida. This was beyond belief. In New York, you couldn't get a better candidate than Lee Zeldin, period. He ran a flawless campaign, but he lost. And yet he carried a number of Republican House members with him. Long Island went heavy Republican. Staten Island, heavy Republican, which it doesn't always do. And of course, other parts of New York. So the real 2 big stories here from a Republican perspective are Florida, which is clearly the marquee story, and even New York. So what happened here? One of 2 things is going on. You ready? There may have been a Republican wave in the making, but the polls and the hosts, the people in the prediction business, self-appointed, were 1 election cycle too early. That is, it might be the next election, when the Senate is positioned much, much, much better, 100% better, for Republican gains. And when the citizen candidates are a little more experienced, and they can pick up those 20 seats, or something akin to it, that they lost by 5% or less, in some cases much less. So we might be 1 cycle off, but I'm not sure. But I certainly think it's possible, and that's certainly the case depending on who the presidential nominee is. So Florida might be the point of the spear about what's coming in the future. Or Florida might be an anomaly. And what you might be watching is ultimately the culture rot that's been taking place in the country, where no matter what the Democrat Party does to our economy, to our border, to our children, to our streets, people are going to vote Democrat in bigger numbers than they're going to vote Republican. In a lot of instances, obviously not all, which would demonstrate a truly rottening of the culture. Decades of indoctrination, decades of media propaganda, decades of expanding the welfare state, decades of open borders. Could be that. So is this just one election cycle too early? When it comes to a wave, it's certainly possible. Or do we have culture rot going on? It's too easy. The superficial will tell you, oh, we picked bad candidates, and yet the candidates across the board were not bad. Look at the Democrat candidates. They were awful. People are saying we need new Republican leadership. That could be very possible. And I would say, particularly in the Senate, I think McConnell is just incapable of communicating. He's almost like the John Fetterman of the Senate, quite frankly. And they're coming up with other excuses, defenses, attacks. I try not to be influenced by it. I notice it. I hear it. I try not to repeat it. I try to think for myself. And so my takeaway is we were either one election cycle too early, and people even say to me, how do we have a Florida and then we have this? Or in 2 more years, it'll demonstrate how corrupt we've become as a people. I hope that's not the case. And I hope I've brought some thinking to this process. Let's take a short listen to Ron DeSantis before we go, who is a fantastic governor, a fantastic person. I know him quite well. I spoke to him this morning. He's extremely smart, charismatic man. Let's take a listen. This is from election night. Go.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much. You know, over these past 4 years, we've seen major challenges for the people of our state, for the citizens of the United States, and above all, for the cause of freedom. We saw freedom in our very way of life and so many other jurisdictions in this country wither on the vine. Florida held the line. We chose facts over fear. We chose education over indoctrination. We chose law and order over rioting and disorder. Florida was a refuge of sanity when the world went mad. We stood as a citadel of freedom for people across this country and indeed across the world. We faced attacks. We took the hits. We weathered the storms, but we stood our ground. We did not back down. We had the conviction to guide us, and we had the courage to lead. We made promises. We made promises to the people of Florida, and we have delivered on those promises. And so today, after 4 years, the people have delivered their verdict. Freedom is here to stay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, thanks to the overwhelming support of the people of Florida, we not only won election, we have rewritten the political map. Thank you for honoring us with a win for the ages.
I encourage you to listen to the whole thing if you didn't see it. It was absolutely fantastic. He is he's a Republican star, and you notice he talks about freedom. All right, ladies and gentlemen, keep your chin up. We keep fighting. I know it's difficult at times, but together we shall overcome. See you next time on Levin TV.